All right, so welcome back, everybody. Again, this is our third San Jose Spotlight election reader panel, and this is the first meeting where we have all 8 participants joining us today. And of course, with us also is our senior reporter, Eli Wolf. Thank you, Eli. Him and our San Jose Spotlight reporter team did a terrific job with all of our election coverage on election night and beyond. There's, all the updates from the registrar of voters, just keeping all of our readers informed of what's going on as far as the vote count over the last week. And you may recall the last meeting that we had was right before the primary election, and many of you, if not all of you, had received your ballots in the mail, and majority of you had actually already filled it out, had already voted for your candidates. So now, as I think some things have transpired. There actually has been, an election, a primary election. So today we'll just discuss and kind of dissect, what went on. Were there any surprises from the general election? Were there, was a lot of what you predicted, did that, actually occur from the primary election? And then other, issues that, have impacted the community from the election. So with that, we'll just dive right into our questions. And again, our senior reporter, Eli, will lead you through that discussion. Thank you, Eli.
Yeah, thank you, Josh. Well, you, I think, just hit the first one and probably the big one that we want to talk about, which is just getting your takes on the results of the primary. If there's anything surprising, any twists that you saw, or if you, called it exactly in all the races that you were following. So like usual, I'm just going to go around. This time I'll just go left to right, who's on my screen first. So that is you, Lisa.
So the biggest surprise and actually disappointment for my family was the low voter turnout. According to Cal Matters, the turnout was actually almost perhaps the lowest turnout ever. I think they're going to have the final results in by July 15th, but they're looking at it being between 16 and 28% of registered voters actually participated in the vote. I think it's a little bit higher in Santa Clara County at about 34%. But that was really disappointing for me because we hear a lot of anger and a lot of opinions on what needs to change. But if we don't vote, then that's the way that our voices are actually heard. That's the way that we actually do the work of democracy. And in fact,
hey, Lisa, sorry to cut you off. Josh, would you mind stop screen sharing? Because I think we're seeing your email right now. Okay, sorry, Lisa, go ahead.
That's okay. I think that we think that the primaries might not be as important as the general elections, but that's when there are candidates, a wider range of candidates. And if you want a different voice to be heard, that's when it counts. And had all those 75 to 80% of voters participate in the election, things could have gone a lot differently.
Gotcha. Thank you, Lisa. Don, you're next on my screen. Why don't you go ahead?
Sure. I didn't really have any surprises of the races that I was following. I think in both the mayoral race and the District 3 City Council race, the top 2 finishers are as predicted. I also was confident that Jeff Rosen and Larry Stone would get reelected, and they did. I guess maybe surprising that Jeff Rosen got through in the primary without a runoff. And I'm not that surprised that we've had low turnout in the primaries. It is troubling to me. I agree with Lisa that that's the time when you want to come out, because that's when you get the array of candidates that you want. I've said previously, I think if we want things to be different, we've got to elect a different sort of candidate. We can't simply elect the same old folks. And the way we change that is in the primary. But in terms of it being a surprise, it's not surprising to me that in fact we don't see a higher level turnout. And it'll be interesting to see, this goes to number 4 on the discussion, as to whether or not the fact that we're going to align the mayoral race with the presidential race, maybe that will help spur turnout. although I'm not sure it'll happen in the primary.
Gotcha.
But it's something to take a look at.
Yeah, thanks, Don. Vicente, how about you?
So I am in agreement. Nothing surprising in terms of turnout, nothing surprising in terms of results. I was a little disappointed that a couple candidates did worse than I had hoped. That I hope they do better, but I think bottom line is now that these results are out there, we got to focus up on the real elections and hopefully get turnout boosted there.
Gotcha. Okay. Gary.
Hi there, Eli. I think the one thing that surprised me was the ballot initiative for the water district. I thought for sure that that would be defeated, and I don't even know if it's been decided as of today because it was kind of a narrow margin. I don't know if they hit that 55, but I thought that would go down for sure because of the flood that happened in 2017, but also the $8.5 million settlement and I don't know how many millions of dollars in lawyers' fees. I thought people would just respond to that and not want to extend terms for those people. I lumped that all into sort of this, the great Democratic Party machinery sent out flyers encouraging people to vote yes for that. So I'm not sure that people actually understood even what they were voting for in some cases. I also will echo that I was surprised by the low voter turnout. I mean, given that we get ballots delivered to our houses, it's not really that hard to tick off a few boxes and put it in an envelope. And in my case, the mailman actually just takes it. So it's not really a lot of work on my side. So I'm not sure. I was perplexed that it was as low as it was. I was not surprised by many of the races or the ones that were confirmed, probably because of the sort of democratic machine that's heavily invested in getting the vote out. But I tend to run a little bit more independently, so I vote for some of those, but not all of them. And I don't just follow a blind slate that somebody hands me. Yeah, that's it.
Gotcha. Thank you. Carmen.
Thanks. I will say I was surprised at the low turnout, and I am surprised that many of us on this call don't seem concerned about that. That to me is a huge issue for us here in California. And so I know that is one of the questions, so I won't go into it too much until we get to that question, but I definitely have quite a few thoughts around that. I am disappointed that Measure A is still on the squeaky wheel here. I'm hoping it gets defeated. I'm not a fan of it for many of the things that Gary just pointed out. I was sad to see that for the district attorney, Rosen, got so many votes. That was extremely disappointing, in my opinion. And, we talk about wanting change, but yet we continue to vote certain people back in. And these are the people that do destructive things to other communities that you may not be part of. And it's important to understand that. And the fact that Sajid came in like third was really, really, really sad. And it just reinforces to me that we still have such racism here in Santa Clara County. And that's what this voting really shows me as a citizen and someone who is of African ancestry. And then the fact that we've got a Chavez Mahan is just, that's a bit disappointing to me. And in addition to that, the sheriff's office, that one is another one that I was surprised at how it ended up going. I know both of the candidates that are going to be in the runoff, so I'm going to definitely be questioning them quite a bit. And so those were the ones that for me, let me see, that were surprising to me, because I see so much in the things that I'm involved in about change, but yet we continue to elect the same people on an ongoing basis. And if nothing else, our district attorney needs to be switched out.
Good. Thank you, Carmen. Ellen, you're next.
Sure. I was expecting low voter turnout because that's the case during primaries, but I was surprised at how incredibly low it was. That was, I agree, quite alarming. I was a little surprised that one of the independent candidates in District 3, Irene Smith, made the runoff. And just because it was a crowded field with some folks who I thought had more funding behind them. So that was just kind of interesting. I don't have a statement to make about that. And then I was not surprised, but disappointed by the attack ads that were happening at the last minute, just because I'm not used to seeing as much of that in local politics. And it's one of the reasons I tend to prefer local politics, is that it is people who are more face-to-face and grappling with local issues. So I did not enjoy seeing that. And yeah, I agree about the DA's race. I was disappointed about that. That was one I was paying close attention to.
Gotcha. Thank you, Ellen. Shane.
Yeah, like many of you, I'm concerned about the low turnout. In my experience with our Republican voters, they tended to turn out later, it seemed, either on election day or, there's some, I think there's some distrust that's been built. Obviously, some of the national rhetoric hadn't been helpful around the process. And I think that we need to continue to encourage people to vote, and that they're, and we have observers assigned to make sure that, everybody's behaving well and everything's on the up and up. So I think people need to be reassured that their vote is secure. In saying that, I am a little concerned because I was getting messages from some people who have moved out of state, and some of them quite some time ago, and they received a ballot at their home out of state, which shouldn't happen. So there is some concern. But surprises, I was surprised in the supervisor District 1 race, which I was following closely. My former employer being one of the candidates. Johnny Camus will be in the runoff, but Sylvia Arenas had surprising strength given that she got in the race late. And Claudia Rossi and Rich Constantine had already picked up a lot of the endorsements from Labor and Democratic folks. So yeah, I was quite surprised that she ran strongly in the first round, and it will be one I'll be watching in the next. The sheriff's race was exactly as I predicted. It's a Johnson-Jansen contest, which should be thoroughly confusing to people if they're not good with names. The one I'm also, in keeping with what Carmen said and some others, the race for the water district measure to kind of the dishonest measure to extend their terms, which read as limit their term to another 4-year term. It looks like it may squeak by. There's still enough votes out there to be counted that it could lose, and the votes that have been coming in late have been against it. So that's somewhat encouraging. I'll be watching that closely as the last 10,000 votes or so are counted to see how that ends up. But I think that a combination of things, as one person cited, some of the machine communication around that, encouraging people to vote yes, and then also just the misleading nature of the wording, I think probably got some people, but keeping an eye on that one. Others were about what I expected. I was actually happy to see independent candidate in the downtown district move forward, because there was a lot of money and effort behind Joanna Rao, for example. And she's kind of a somewhat distant third, so that was interesting to me. And then the last one I'll highlight is in Council District 1, which was just a blowout. Now I know that Rosemary Kamei had all of the institutional support, but I was surprised there wasn't more grassroots support for Ramona Snyder. So,
Gotcha. Thank you, Shane. And last but not least, Alex.
Hey, thanks. Some similar thoughts and surprises to what I think Ellen and Shane talked about. I guess I would highlight the 4 biggest surprises for me were, and some of them were where people placed in the race. So I was most surprised by the Supervisor District 1, the City Council District 3, City Council District 5, and the district attorneys. In the district attorney, I also, like Carmen, was kind of surprised that Sajid Khan, who ran a very long, ambitious, policy-oriented campaign, did not even move ahead of his opponent. And I think it was a good reminder of how much of a moderate Jeff Rosen was able to be in this race, with Daniel Chung running to the right and Sajid Khan running to the left. I think those 2 opponents at the same time probably allowed him to really easily carve out the moderate territory and continue to build support. In the District 5 race, I was most shocked, probably my biggest shock to the entire night, was where Rolando Bonilla ended up in the race. I think his campaign, y'all correct me if I'm wrong, I think he raised $170,000. And it just shows you that money matters, but voters decide. And for whatever reason, whatever campaign he ran, didn't resonate with enough folks. And to see him get that few votes was really surprising for me, because he had been in the media, including through Spotlight and a lot of news coverage, and has been out in the Planning Commission involved in that. So that really shocked me. I thought he would come in second or third, as opposed to fourth, pretty close to the 5th place. In District 3, I was sort of surprised and not surprised. I felt like because Omar is a very grassroots oriented candidate and he has deep support in the Latino community, I thought that the sort of public wisdom wouldn't predict him to perform as well as he did. And I think it's an indication of the strength of this district in the Latino community, and how the Latino community is still a very powerful force in District 3 in determining the winner. And I think he's now got the very inside track, not only because he scored 20% higher than Irene Smith, but because it is a Democratic leaning district. I think he will have a pretty clear path to victory come November. And then the last race was the supervisorial race, District 1. Like, I think it was Shane who talked about, I was surprised that Sylvia Arenas did that well, but even more surprised by the fact that collectively Sylvia, Rich Constantine, and Claudia Rossi, who are all, I believe, Democrats, collectively, that was a big percentage of the vote. And it seems like the effort that some folks in the progressive community, particularly the labor movement, spent to redistrict this seat is one of the reasons I think Shane and I are a little surprised, although we shouldn't be, because that was part of the purpose of the redistricting, is to make it a more progressive district. So it is still surprising. And I think it's pretty clear that Sylvia Arenas has the inside track if you are a believer in putting together the progressive blocks of the different candidates into one. So sorry, that was a little long. Those are my thoughts.
No, not at all. I appreciate it.
Hey, Eli, can I make a quick comment on D3, since several people expressed surprise about the fact that Irene Smith emerged, and I was not surprised. You know, the scuttlebutt about the sort of establishment candidate, Joanna Rao, there was a lot of disconcerting comments that I heard from neighbors about the fact that Sam Liccardo, who has high negatives in the district right now, thought he could simply name a candidate who had not been around and elevate her into the runoff, if not into office. And I think the fact that Irene was selected was a reaction to that, and it was definitely foreseeable among the independent candidates, and I supported a different independent candidate. Irene ran the most vigorous race for the longest period of time, and it was quite clear that she had much more support than Joanna or any of the other alternative candidates to Omar Torres. And I agree, Omar will be formidable, and we can discuss that later. But it was not surprising to me at all, and I think anyone who was looking at it closely could tell that Irene was likely to emerge as the alternative candidate.
Gotcha. Yeah, thank you, Don, for that.
And Don, Joanna hadn't been in the district very long, right? As a resident or as a community advocate?
She and I met with her very early on before she dropped out because she had a small child, and before Sam Liccardo tapped her to re-engage. She had moved into the district only a couple of years earlier, and although she has family that goes back in San Jose for a number of years, but she had not been involved in local neighborhood activity. And many of her immediate neighbors claim not to know her. And so that was an issue, and it was something I raised with her when I met with her privately. You know, pay some dues, come back in 4 or 8 years when you have a record of neighborhood activism, and you're more likely to be successful. And I think it was a reaction from residents to the fact that, more against the mayor, who thought he could handpick a candidate, and he endorsed in the primary. He endorsed Joanna Rao, who was not involved in neighborhood affairs. So there was a real anti-Joanna Rao sentiment in the downtown. I know lots of people who had that sentiment, and Irene was the beneficiary of that.
Yeah, I'll agree. I heard similar things about Joanna Rao in the neighborhood. And I will say Irene Smith is the only candidate that I saw come to my specific neighborhood. So there's a lot of local activism to kind of interface, and she began very early. So I was aware of that. I was just surprised it actually trumped the backing.
Gotcha. I'll ask the second question about the mayor's race, but I'll also just want to invite, since some of you have already kind of addressed this, that if you want to respond to anything anybody else has said, feel free to do that instead too. So the second question is just, what are your thoughts on, the Chavez-Mahan face-off that we're going to get in November? What do you think of them as, I guess, why do you think that they emerged as front runners, but also what do you think of them? And let's start, Ellen, why don't you go ahead?
This one's tough for me. This race, I've not been excited about any of the mayoral candidates fully, which has been a problem. I ended up supporting Chavez, but I was very unhappy about the attack ads and the kind of sense of how things will be, like just the carrying out of politics, the way it's been carried out. So my decision was more a choice around whose policy priorities fit mine the best and seemed to also be a front runner. Matt Mahan's policies are not quite as aligned with mine. And so, yeah, I've been disappointed by the choices and had to make some tough decisions.
Gotcha. Gary, how about you?
I think I supported Matt, and I think at the last time we met, I talked about Cindy, and I didn't like, I thought some misinformation that she was putting out in some of her ads about how she had sort of single-handedly solved the housing crisis. And as a nurse and somebody who's gone out and worked in homeless shelters, but also done the homeless counts, I can tell you the problem here has gotten worse. The most recent numbers, of course, are that our homeless numbers are up 35% in San Jose. And but somebody in this group reminded me that she had participated in Measure A and had some of that was the information. So I felt kind of a little naive, and I went during the last 2 weeks, I went and looked at Measure A, and I thought, well, what is this all about? It was the 2016 $950 million bond, and she was the spearhead of that as the in her role as the supervisor. They were supposed to build 4,500 units, and only 156 have been built, and they say that there's more in the pipeline. And every time she's been interviewed about that, she keeps pointing to like San Jose City Hall is the people that are obstructing us, and these developers are the people. But it really just speaks to like sort of an ineffective worker. And I feel like, you know, I don't know if you had given me $950 million, I probably would have built quite a few shelters by now, and would have at least housed some of those people in a temporary kind of way. And so, like, when I kept looking at that, I kept thinking to myself, you know, like, this is a tried and true politician who is just not delivering. And so I might not agree with everything that Matt is putting forward, but I'm gonna be a change candidate, and I'm gonna vote for this other guy. Because I feel like, well, you had your chance, and 156 units out of the 4,500 that you promised is just not enough. And I know that homelessness is the biggest issue facing most of my neighbors, and we have had meetings here, you know, at my house and with candidates and things, and we've talked about that, and that's the issue that keeps coming up. But I don't want misinformation, and I felt like coming out of that campaign, there was a lot of misinformation about claims that were just not true. So it seemed like it was just more politician talk rather than actual solutions. And then there was an awful lot of just defining the problem, but not really offering any real solutions. So I'm hoping that, you know, people are going to pay attention, and that, you know, they're going to try and vote for a change rather than somebody who's just kind of a career politician who's not really has a good track record.
Gotcha. Thank you, Gary. Lisa, how about you?
Like Ellen, I was not excited about this race or any of the candidates that we had to choose from. I ended up voting for Cindy Chavez, but I wasn't excited about it. And I had attended a community meeting with Matt Mann and asked him quite a few questions, and he indulged me in answering my questions. But I think that overall, his answers to my questions seemed like he didn't really care about homelessness on a personal level. And he kind of felt like he was blaming a little bit. And so that turned me off a lot. And I'm just hoping that next time we have an election, we have some more exciting candidates than these.
Gotcha. Thanks. Vicente.
So I'm a little concerned about the prospect of a Chavez Mann face-off because, as we've seen from the public disclosures of the campaign financing, the Chavez campaign is receiving pretty significant donations from the San Francisco 49ers, Jed York, and his machine. So I am interested to find out how that's going to affect everything. I think that if Chavez does win, then we're going to see a lot of pro-development stances that are going to come out of City Hall. I don't think that's going to play particularly well with the issue of homelessness, because these developments and contracts to builders are going to, be for young professionals and not address those issues substantively. Although she would have us believe from the advertisements of the little spots on TV that those issues are going to be dealt with. Mahan is a little more of a mystery to me, so I'd like to see where he stands on the issues a bit more before I comment on his campaign. But I think if Chavez does win, it would be a nice moment for representation. But I think that we should remember that moment is fleeting, and we need to focus back on the issues after that moment's passed.
Gotcha. Thanks. Shane.
I think that in the mayor's race, this should be interesting. I did want to touch first on Labor's negative pieces. They spent, I think it was around $55,000 for negative pieces against Johnny Camus, who was running a positive campaign. And they're very, how they're able to continue with their campaigns that are tinged with, racist tropes, if you will, when they lambasted the former SVO PAC for that kind of behavior is beyond me. They've gotten away with it for years, darkening people's photos and implying something sinister about Johnny's Arab roots or whatever, Palestinian background. And so it's the height of hypocrisy for me. And I really detest all of the very negative pieces, especially when they're as inaccurate as many of them were. I do credit, though, our local news outlets for highlighting that throughout the process. So thank you to you guys and everybody who did cover that issue. And the race itself, I was not surprised by the top two. I kind of thought that's the way it would go. I guess I was surprised that they came out so far ahead of the rest of the pack. I thought it would be a little closer between some of the other big names in the race. I'm kind of excited about Matt Mahan's race. Him being fairly new to the council, I know he takes a fresh look at things from a different perspective. I think that's really needed when it takes 6 to 7 years from the time the council approves an affordable housing project to it actually being completed. That's unacceptable, especially when it's using, taxpayer dollars, Measure A money, Measure E money at various sources. I think that it behooves us to find ways to move these things ahead faster, to get people housed more quickly. I think he is compassionate. He's not a demonstrative person. He's a very reserved person, but he's a hard worker. Successfully started and sold company. Basically worked his way through high school, commuted 2 hours each way. These are all true parts of his story, from humble beginnings down in Gilroy, making his way to San Jose every day for school, so that he had an opportunity to get a great higher education, which is kind of an American dream, right? And I'd like to see him bring some of his innovation to City Hall. So we know what we'll get with Cindy. More of the same. They just gave a $2.5 million contract. What was it? That's being looked at by Otto Lee, wants them to look at the Board of Supervisors. But Cindy was one of the votes and one of the great champions of a $2.5 million contract for a historical document about county. And this is how she treats your tax dollars and my tax dollars. It's her personal fiefdom. If you want somebody who will rule San Jose and give money to their friends and punish their enemies, then vote for Cindy. But if you want somebody who's going to take a broader view of our city and all its people, I think Matt's the choice going into November.
Gotcha. Thanks, Shane. And Carmen.
Thanks. So I have a difference of opinion with Shane. I don't see Matt as being anything different. He's just another side of, there's Cindy on one side and there's Matt on the other side. They're from the same coin. So, unfortunately, these are the candidates that we ended up with. And again, it goes back to whoever votes and their voices are the ones that are heard. That's why we end up with the type of candidates that we do. Matt Mahan is a racist. I will tell him that to his face. He has done some things and said some things in city council meetings and also in some of these candidate forums that is really, clearly has shown that. In addition to that, there was, and Spotlight did an article on this, there was an ad that he did in December of last year, where he sent out a flyer to survey the community on defunding the police. Now, we know that defunding the police, just that phrase, is a hot button for certain people. And that when you put that hot button out there, you're really trying to say something to Black and brown communities, in case some of you don't understand that. How that comes across when a candidate starts using that and waving that in front of their supporters, it really sheds an ugly light on Black and brown communities. And it really, really bothers me. So I cannot support someone like him. In addition to that, he had come to an Afro uprising. We had an Afro uprising candidate forum. He was the only one to show up, so I give him lots of credit for that. But again, he is just like Cindy. He's just like any other political candidate who, this is their profession, this is their job. And he says the party line things. I didn't hear anything from him, and he didn't want to really take a stance. He kept, a lot of the questions that we asked him, he was on the fence about things. And I personally don't want to hear that anymore. But part of that is I have to push that. And I have to, when I'm in these meetings, say things that are going to challenge them and make them answer. Cindy, she's a woman, so that's a plus. I would like to hope and see that she'll do something different. I'm definitely going to hold her accountable. I think the biggest thing that happens is we put these individuals in office and there's no accountability. There's no following up to make sure that they are doing what they committed to on the campaign trail. And both parties accept money from various organizations that I would or would not agree with. I can't fix that. That has to be done by us as residents of this city, of this county, of this state, saying we want money out of politics. That's on us. If we can continue to talk about it and complain about it, but if we're not going to do anything to bring a change about it, then we can't hold them accountable for doing what we're allowing them to do. But it was, again, it's unfortunate that I personally do not listen to the news anymore. So I don't even watch TV. So I don't see any of these ads that everyone's talking about. And maybe that's what we need to do, start disassociating from these messaging areas that give us this kind of information. And I didn't get any negative thing in the mail. I think the mail was one thing that I got, and that was about it. But other than that, I really, like I shared in the last conversations, I really go and do my own homework. And it's important to look at each one who's contributing to their campaign and who supports them. And Liccardo supports Mahan. And that already tells me something right there. I'm not a fan of him. And again, like I said, he is a racist, and it's important for folks to understand that, because you may not be experiencing it, but it does happen.
Gotcha. Thanks, Carmen. I know that we have, I think, Dawn and Alex, you haven't spoken yet. I'd love to check out at least one more question before we get off. So I was going to just see if we could start with you two, and you could either answer this last question or try to address this other one, just about, the fact that we had really low turnout this election. And if you have any thoughts on sort of, what can be done to address that, we get more voters out there in the checking ballots. So Alex, why don't we start with you?
Sure. I don't have anything particularly profound or original to say on the third question, but I might on the second. So sure. I'm going to harken back if that's okay. I mean, so, I saw 4 major candidates in the mayor's race. I respect Deb Davis. I like Matt Mahan. He's a friend of mine. I agree with a lot of Raul Perales and what he has put forward in his campaign and on council. I'm supporting Cindy Chavez because, like I talked about last time, I'm looking for a leader who can get big things done. And I think that is her. And I care about a lot of things, but I also care about ethics and integrity and someone who's going to make real change. I'm probably one of the few people who supported Sam Liccardo 8 years ago and is now supporting Cindy Chavez, who are not ideological allies. So I look for someone who can get important things done and make change in our city. I am going to try to be passionate and polite in disagreeing with Gary here. I am in my day job a housing advocate, and at night I work on housing issues as well. It is really, really hard to build housing, and it is a massive systematic issue. There is not one individual who is responsible, but there is one person who, you were right about, Gary, did lead the way on trying to get $950 million for affordable housing, and that is Cindy Chavez. It is not her fault that 156 units have been built. That is, there are construction issues that are involved. There are a whole host of other issues, including the fact that it takes a lot of money to build affordable housing because you have to find ways to make up for the rent that you're not getting because it's not market rate. And you have to use state and local funding. You have to piece it together. And that takes years, and that's messed up, and it shouldn't be that way, but that's the reality. And I don't blame any single elected official for that. I blame our entire system, which is why I work on these issues all the time to try to get housing built more quickly. That's what we all want. But there's one candidate who led to try to get more affordable housing. If you look at the city of San Jose's housing report on how much housing's been built, we've actually built the amount of market rate we need, and we're way behind on affordable housing. So an elected official who says, I'm going to put forward a ballot measure to try to make it easier for developers to build affordable housing quicker is a really important voice and perspective. And I'm just a little deterred by some of the, again, I offer myself as a resource. If anyone wants to talk about what little I know about development, I'm happy to share. But Cindy Chavez has been a major leader. And as soon as we can get those units built is better. Those would be homes for folks who really need them. And it takes longer than it should. But let's continue to push for elected officials who get that done quicker. You know, I don't want people in shelters. I want people in homes. Housing first is the way to go. That gets people in homes first. And that's what folks like Cindy Chavez have been talking about. So as much as I support her as a candidate, even more I support housing advocacy and getting housing built. And I think that's where she's been.
Gotcha. Thanks, Alex.
Eli, can I just respond a little bit to that? Because he mentioned my name. So
yeah, sure. Go for it.
Just that, you know, the idea here is if you're going to take credit for raising or spearheading the $950 million to build homes, and you only have 156 built, then you also have to accept the responsibility that you've mismanaged the money. And the homeless industrial complex, Alex, you have to let me speak. The homeless industrial complex have an interest in doing and making houses rather than actually giving the people the dignity of not living in the dirt in our parks into temporary shelters. You can't take somebody from a park and say, we're gonna let you live in this park for 6 years while this homeless industrial complex, which you are a part of, Alex, is trying to find ways to work with Cindy Chavez and create more homes. You had your chance and it's not working. And we need people who are going to try and actually give these people the dignity that they deserve and make our city as beautiful as it deserves to be. And what you're currently doing is not working, and everybody knows it.
Hey, Gary, I would recommend not using San Jose Spotlight to personally attack me. That's not what this forum is intended to do. If you want to do that, let's do that another time, but let's not do that here.
Yeah, guys, I got to step in because one, we're almost out of time. And also, I want to make sure that we can keep things civil and discussing the policy issues here. So I'm going to go to Don now to address either the second or the third question, whichever you'd like, Don.
Okay, sure. Well, I do think it's interrelated. A number of folks have said they were dissatisfied with the array of candidates for mayor, which is really the signature election here in San Jose. And that helps suppress voting. There's a general sense that I get from people that nothing we do in terms of voting changes anything. And it's hard to say they're wrong, but we got to keep fighting. Voting's one of the tools in the toolkit to try to make change. We need better candidates who are not aligned with powerful forces. Right now we have labor on one side, and Cindy Chavez is the embodiment of labor. And we have Liccardo on the other side. Carmen is right. Matt Mahan is the handpicked candidate of Sam Liccardo. And what I think we're going to see is a referendum on Cindy Chavez and Sam Liccardo, two of the most prominent figures in the Valley, both of whom have high negatives. I know them personally. I like them both on a personal level. I have disagreements with their policies and specifically their COVID policies. I've mentioned that before. But that's what we've got. We've got a referendum on two people who've been around for a long time, and they've not moved the ball for whatever reason. They've not moved the ball forward. Homelessness has gotten worse over the last 8 years, not better. So there's been no improvement, and we've got the usual suspects, if you will, and that suppresses voting, and it does so especially among young people. We always see that. That's true not just here in San Jose, but all over. Young people tend not to vote at the same rate as older folks. And I can say as an older person, I'm somewhat cynical, but I still vote. And it takes a while for young people to develop that. And maybe that's where we need to focus on letting young people understand the world isn't perfect, but perfect is the enemy of the good. And we need to keep voting, and we need to bring candidates who are not aligned with powerful forces and money.
Can I
I'll
add
there.
to that, since it's talking about youth voting, which is something I get very invested in? It's a small point.
Yeah, go for it, Ellen.
Okay. Well, one of the things I was noticing was the timing of this election. San Jose State was out of school when this happened. There was mail-in voting. Not everyone lives here, but one of the biggest predictors of youth voting is outreach and recruitment. And often politicians don't target youth voters because they aren't the ones with the resources and the money. So I'd just really love to see more investment in candidates kind of working with the university and the schools to really educate young people about local politics and their options.
You know, that's a great point. And one of the things about college students, and I ran for office 8 years, and I was using the voter list, and they're often outdated because college kids move at a frequent rate at that age. The registrar can't keep up with them. And maybe there are avenues that are more informal for allowing candidates to reach out to younger voters. So that's a very, very, very good point that Ellen raises.
And if you don't mind, I'll jump in real quick on this too, because someone who is an immigrant and has lived under other types of governments, I think voting has been kind of trivialized in this country. And folks don't seem to understand the value of their vote. And that is something that I think our media, our news publications, whether they be online or hard copy, they do a really good job of talking about about people aren't voting, but they don't talk about why. And it would be important for them to start really making this to be the gift that it is. I think a lot of Americans have forgotten. This is a really incredible gift and privilege that we have. In California, we get it mailed to us. We have so much flexibility. Look at what's happening across the country in states where they are preventing them. They're passing laws so that Black and brown people can't go vote. We have it here, and we just continue to treat it like we take it for granted. And so it's really important that we start to make this thing, again, like I said, the gift that it is, and start to really appreciate it. Even if we disagree and we have different opinions, voting is what's the key to everything here. And it's critical that our media, and I'm going to keep saying that, the media has to do a much better job of making voting something that is exciting. It really is. People in other countries are killed if they don't go out and vote. And so it's so important that we start to look at this in a positive versus all the negative things that are constantly said about voting. And when folks hear that, it turns them off. And there's a reason that certain groups want to turn you off. They want to disengage you from the process. And so it's so important that that's the messaging that we have to start getting out to folks. Hey, you're getting disengaged from this process, and it's important to start to get engaged, because this is, as someone just said, this is the way that we make change. This is the way in this country we can make change. If we don't like it, we vote them out. But if we're not voting, they're going to stay in, and we have no one to blame but ourselves.
Gotcha.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carmen. We're basically out of time right now. I'm sorry I didn't get to ask everyone all the rest of the questions on this list, but I appreciate the back and forth. So that's it on my end. Josh, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, everybody. Really appreciate everybody, sharing their sentiments, about the primary election. And again, just a friendly reminder that just for all of us, just to be respectful of everybody's viewpoints, and sure everyone has a chance to speak, and really keep an open mind, of their perspectives. With that in mind, this is actually the last meeting for the primary election season. The next time we'll all convene will actually be this fall. It will be Wednesday, October 15th, and lead up to the November general election. So it'll give us plenty of time for all of us to kind of see how things transpire over the next few months. But of course, so if anybody has any questions, feel free to reach out beforehand. But again, really appreciate everybody, participating and taking the time to really engage with our election coverage and just kind of share their thoughts about the primary election. That's all from me. Anything else from you, Eli?
No, it's it. Just appreciate each and every one of you for participating. I've really enjoyed your insights, and yeah, it's been fun for me. So thank you.
You did a great job moderating, Eli.
Yes, you did. Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
You did a terrific job, and thanks for moving it along. All right, everybody. Well, this concludes our third meeting, and I look forward to, again, reconvening this fall. See you all soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Have a good week. Bye, Shane. See you soon.